Hey guys, it's Charles Hoskinson here. I just wanted to make a video real quick to clean up a few things and also talk about my thoughts about consensus. It's actually the first time I've gone to consensus since 2017. The environment's a little different. In 2017, things were a bit crazy. In fact, that's right when Bitcoin shot to 10K, and everybody was going a bit wild, and everything was kind of crazy. There was even a 10K party that they had where the whole space kind of came together and everybody had fun. So this was about half the size, I think, of last year's consensus or the 2017 consensus. And it really showed there was a lot less booths, and the makeup of the booths were more enterprise oriented than cryptocurrency oriented. I think NEM was there, and some Dash people were there, and obviously Ethereum made a strong showing, as they always do, both the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance and Consensus, and a lot of people from the EF were floating around. But most of the ventures were either service providers or infrastructure people or people on the enterprise side. Like, for example, Microsoft had a booth, and IBM had a booth, and Deloitte had a booth. And it was pretty interesting to kind of see the change in dynamic. I remember going to conferences many years ago for the cryptocurrency space, and we all kind of knew each other because there was like 12 people there. Now going to these conferences, there's like 5,000 people, and most of the people don't know each other, or they're just a different crowd. So I've kind of felt like an old guy or slightly out of place. I was mostly hanging out with the polymath people, and my key takeaway though was just how poorly the security at the conference treated people. We had one incident actually in the basement. So the sponsor rooms, Polymath was a tier one sponsor, and they put a lot of money into this conference. We had rooms in the basement for Polymath and all the other people. And on the third day of the conference, just a few hours before the conference closed, one of the security guards came in and asked for all of our badges. I had my badge, but it's the third day of the conference. Not everybody had their badges in the room. And he basically told everybody who didn't have a badge that they had to leave the sponsor room, or else he would call security and have them escorted out. I just can't understand why a few hours before a conference closes on the third day, why the conference organizers would feel it necessary to tell security to go randomly audit the sponsor rooms, which are downstairs in the basement, and tell people who've given them six figures that unless you have credentials, we're going to kick you out of your own sponsor room. We even took a video of the event, and the guy threatened to throw us out, arrest us for trespassing. So that's the way consensus is, I guess. 450 speakers. I wasn't invited, but I still had a chance to speak 3 different times. So I always find a way through the back door. They don't let you in the front, come in the back. And I don't know if I'll go next year unless I have a compelling reason. It's certainly not the most interesting conference I've been to. It's a big industry event and lots of business is done there. But to be honest with you, I've seen a big pivot towards Asia in the last 2 years in the space. And the conferences in Korea, Japan, China, and other places are just far more interesting. And I've had a lot better time in those jurisdictions than I've had in Western conferences, with the exception of the smaller conferences. Bruce always puts on a good event, Satoshi Circle. Never actually been, but every time I hear about it, it always sounds fun. And I love Pavel's events actually over in BIP, the Bitcoin Incredible Party in Ukraine. So space is maturing, things are changing, starting to recognize less and less people, more diverse crowd. The CFTC was actually there at Consensus, which was really interesting. They had a whistleblower booth. So the CFTC, for those of you who don't know, is the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and basically they regulate futures contracts, derivatives. So for example, if you issue a token that's backed by gold, that's probably going to be regulated by them. So they have this thing called the whistleblower program. So if you think someone's violating law and you actually have evidence to it, you can tell them, and they give you a reward up to 30% of the violation. And the largest one they've awarded so far for the crypto space has been, I think, $30 million. So, or that's what the guys told me. But I think it takes a lot of gusto to show up at a cryptocurrency conference as a regulator and have a booth specifically for whistleblowing in case anybody in the space violates the law. So yeah. Anyway, these conferences I don't really think are worth the money unless someone gives you a ticket or you get a big discount. And certainly nothing major was announced there. That said, Polymath did announce Polymesh, and that was just kind of a stub. It was an intent to build something really special and really interesting, basically a special purpose blockchain specifically for security tokens. And I'd say that's very interesting, but it was more of a coming soon. We'll give more information later than a full demo where we actually showed a product and so forth. But it started a great conversation, and we had a chance all throughout the conference to talk to a lot of people in the security token industry, as well as some regulators, and specifically about what do they want, what would they want to be an issuer, what are the audit requirements, and all these other things. And it's always nice to have those types of dialogues. And so I hope that as that product gets more mature, at some point, Poly's going to be able to give a great demo, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And that dialogue is just going to keep growing and continuing. And it's a cool one because it's a dialogue you just don't have with other cryptocurrency people. It's a dialogue that you have with governments and regulators and large institutions and so forth. So you can kind of get out of your lane a bit and see how the world is. All right, see what else here. Oh yeah, some house cleaning. There were some articles that came out about the MOU that we signed in Mongolia, and the cryptocurrency press never ceases to amaze me with their lack of due diligence and level of accuracy. Generally speaking, here's a pro tip if you're ever going to be a journalist. If you're writing about an MOU or a press release or something a company's done, the first thing you do before you write an article is you reach out to that company for comment and for additional information, because the odds are, because the company signed the MOU, maybe they'd be able to tell you a little bit more. You can get quotes, you can get a much richer, better article. If you just write about something you heard, you're probably not going to write accurate information. So one article in particular said that we signed an MOU with the Mongolian government and with Pharma Trust. We did neither. We signed an MOU with the two leading blockchain groups within Mongolia, and we started a dialogue with the Mongolian government about doing a training course, just like what we did in Ethiopia, which probably will yield to some relationship at some point in the future. But we're both on the try before you buy model. So we did not sign an MOU with the Mongolian government. Never happened. And yeah, we're going to do an air quality pilot with a private vendor. And we'd love to work with the government of the city of Ulaanbaatar, but that requires additional relationships, discussions, and those will happen over the coming months to years. Pharma Trust, we've never met the principals of them, but I use them as an example of a real life cryptocurrency pilot that does actually provide some value to the space. Mongolia has a terrible problem with counterfeit medicine and adulterated medicine. In the urban areas, about 18% of medicine you buy will either be expired, the milligrams will be wrong, or it'll be just not real. It's a sugar pill where it should have been a particular drug. And in the rural areas, it could be up to 40%. So that basically means you're just rolling the dice 1 out of 5 times or almost half every time you take a pill. And most of that comes from China. So anybody who's trying to solve that problem is a good actor. And they ran some pilots within the jurisdiction, and they've done some good work within that jurisdiction. We'd love to chat with them and work with them. And it came up during our due diligence, and it came up during our conversations with actors in the jurisdiction. But we never signed an MOU with them, and we don't have a relationship with them. But we admire the work they're doing, and it sounds like they're trying to solve real problems. But crypto journalism apparently decided to take statements and just roll it all up and say, we're partnered with the Mongol government and we're partnered with Pharma Trust, and that's just not true. And these things just keep happening. So it makes you wonder if these people are real journalists at all. So, it is what it is. Let's see what else here. So I'm currently in New York, and this is my last day here. And then I finally get to fly back to Colorado. On my upcoming travel schedule, I'll be the second half of this year in June going to Israel, and I'll be in Tel Aviv, and hopefully we'll be able to have some great events there. And then in July, I may be going to Uganda. There's several invitations I got. I'll also be in Japan for Waiichi's conference. It's a big conference. I think there's like 10 or 20,000 people. It's not a crypto conference. It's a big digital world conference, and I got a keynote there. And that's going to be, I believe, June 8th to 14th, but I'd have to double check those dates. Yeah, so a lot of travel in the next few months. This After July, I'm going to cut it down tremendously, and you'll see a lot more of me in Colorado. So when I do these events and these AMAs and these types of announcements, you'll see my standard usual setting as opposed to a dreary hotel room at 5 o'clock in the morning. And that always makes me feel better. And hopefully, I'll be able to lose a little bit of weight and go on a diet and get slightly healthier. On the Cardano side, a few announcements there. David Esser is the senior product manager for Cardano, and David's going to go on the Cardano effect at some point soon, I think next week, but I don't recall the exact time. And he's going to talk about the Cardano Roadmap and basically how to use the Cardano Roadmap. So it's not just a document where we just put some things and there'll be percentages or something. That's not longer a viable or smart way to do things. It's rather going to be a document that is basically functional. So it'll be a repository for regular status updates. It'll contain kind of high level goals of where we want to go. And then for milestones we've already completed, it'll provide a retrospective. For example, with Byron, because Byron is now closed, the roadmap will actually list all the accomplishments that we had during Byron. What did we actually do? We see a lot from people who want to spread FUD and say that we're all idiots and we don't know what we're doing, that we're just a wallet, we've never shipped anything, it's just a white paper. And the reality is there's an enormous amount of stuff we've done and progress made. So it's really important to make a listing of, well, what was accomplished for things that came before. And then also when we talk about a milestone like Shelley or Gauguin, to better manage expectations of what are the KPIs behind this, what do we consider to be Shelley, and what does success mean for Shelley? And should that be successful, then we can do the same type of closing that we are going to do with Byron. So David's going to provide a pretty exhaustive explanation of that. And I'd highly recommend you go to the Cardano Effect Reddit. They usually run a thread. And if you want to add questions that specifically you want to ask David, because they always take some community questions, that's the time and place to do it. Shortly after the roadmap comes out, we'll make some sort of statement on the Shelley Testnet. Things are looking pretty good. Not going to spoil anything there, but I'm pretty happy with the level of progress. I'm also happy with the way the software is coming together. The wallet backend looks really nice. We just made another release there, and now we're cleaning a few things up, and it's being integrated with the Rust code. And I'm pretty happy with the way that Ouroboros is shaped up. And not only is the code looking nice, the research is looking nice too. So it's pretty clear how we actually get to the next steps. So we'll make a statement at a later date about that. But things are moving along. Things are looking pretty good. In terms of industry infrastructure, a lot of exchanges still talk to us and want to do stuff with us, and certain ones that shall remain nameless are still interested. Multi-sig is coming soon. We've had 6 different designs for it, and we've consolidated them to one that we think we like a lot that will likely ship with Shelley when we ship Shelley, but it may be available for the Shelley testnet. We'll see if we can get that feature in for the first version of the testnet. That multi-sig is going to be a lot of fun to deploy. It's kind of a necessity, especially for us large holders of ADA. It's a security requirement. Now, one cool thing for multi-sig is the concept of hardware-based multi-sig, where let's say you use Yoroi as an app like Copay, where you have a pending transaction and you send it to all your other people. The actual key management signing could be done on a Ledger device. So we've talked to Vacuum Labs. I also talked to the Ledger guys here. They had a big booth. And we think that it would be possible to do an MFN multi-sig using Ledger Nanos and something like the Yoroi app. So you can kind of get the convenience and benefit of using a cell phone app to manage a multi-sig, but then actually when time comes to sign, you can use a Ledger device to handle that. So that should provide an order of magnitude additional security to people who are doing this. And of course, we are in discussions about multi-sig in relation to delegation and staking. So it's not just good enough to have a multi-sig address. If the point is about multi-sig is you're probably going to have a lot of funds in those addresses. So it's very important that those addresses can delegate to a stake pool or to a stake key that can then redelegate. So we will have support for that. We know how to build that, and that's part of the specifications we released in March. And we're now consolidating to a design that we think is pretty good. We're likely also going to adopt for Shelley BEC32 address formatting. Blockstream did some good work there, and it's a nice future-proofed address structure, and it looks like a lot of the space is moving in that particular direction. So look for that too. Okay. Anyway, that's most of the wrap up. Coinbase, excuse me, consensus. There we go. It was an interesting event. Lots of interesting interviews. Block TV was always fun, and got to be on CNBC Africa with Rand, and he's always a good interview. And we talked to a few print media, Rachel Wolfson, and she was with Forbes and a few others. So it's always nice to be able to go in one place and talk to like 25 journalists. It saves you a lot of time, and it's a lot smaller. I would argue maybe 3,000 people at most, 4,000. I remember the Malta conference I went to last year had 8,000 people, and I stayed at the hotel. It took 20 minutes to go down the elevator because of how many people were there, and that was definitely a much larger event than Consensus, a much cheaper event than Consensus, and more meaningful. Even McAfee was there doing crazy things. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And let's see if there's any questions real quick in the chat. Anything interesting? Since we have a live chat, I might as well take one or two questions. I ran into Tone Vays, by the way. I saw him getting an interview. I asked him, "Hey, let's do an interview," and we were gonna do it, but we couldn't find the time to come together. But I'm happy to come on Tone's show. Yeah, and of course we have the standard questions. This is getting way over the timeline now. Seriously, man, been following the project since 2017. Only excuses we get is, well, Microsoft had delays, this had delays, blah blah blah. This isn't helping at all. Okay, great for you. I'm sure you can buy some Tron if you'd like. Let's see here. Right. Actually, I ran into Justin's son. He's always a nice guy. He's a marketing machine, but you gotta give Justin credit for just being able to just keep going and going. And somehow I think it'll be around for a while. Oh, I completely forgot. One last thing. So I made a statement about auditable backdoors, and some people within the Monero community took this to say that both Cardano and Zcash are going to somehow have backdoors in the system that will be handed to a government entity. This is completely insane. This was never my intent in the statement, and it's just a perversion of my statement. And I saw it actually in the Monero Reddit, and it's propagated fairly long. It even came to our Cardano Reddit. First, guys, if we put a backdoor, who would we even give the backdoor to? Think it through. Honestly, I mean, come on. It's an insane concept. The statement was, if you wanted to have privacy, the problem is we exist in a world right now where either you're pseudonymous or are not private, or we're totally private. It would be nice that you can embed within the transaction itself some capability that you can give a third party a key or some evidence, and then they could use that to verify the claims that you've made in the transaction. For example, let's say that you're trading two instruments, a commodity and some cash, and then you create an audit component to that transaction, which is completely opaque to the outside world, but then you provide that to your auditor, like PwC or a BDO or something like that, because they need to see your books at the end of the year as a company. It's a standard practice, and the problem is that the current technology with snarks and these things makes this very difficult to enforce. So, you know, yes, it would be very nice to have some capability within the system that if you wanted to do that, you could do that, or else you just can't use the system. You can never be compliant within the system. Don't you have a right to decide who you share information with? And don't you have a right to be able to lawfully use a system if you so desire? But somehow the Monero people decided that that equates to China has a backdoor, the United States government has a backdoor into the system. There is no zero cash improvement proposal. There is no Cardano improvement proposal suggesting this. And if they think there is one, I'd love for them to point that out. Else you are lying to people. And you're lying in a very shameful way. Normally, I wouldn't escalate this, but actually, Fluffy Pony, one of the founders of Monero, said this on Twitter. And I think that's just dishonest and disingenuous. The research into nuanced auditability and nuanced de-anonymization is a very necessary research for bringing institutions into the space. Furthermore, when I made these comments, it was in context to Polymesh, which is a regulated ledger, which deals with broker dealers and MSBs and governments and auditors. So of course there needs to be a de-anonymization and audit policy for these types of systems. You need to have that type of technology. Of course, because it's a regulated ledger. So that has nothing to do with Cardano, but then they implied that somehow Cardano is going to have a backdoor. These things happen in the space, and when they come up, sometimes I ignore them. But when a founder of another cryptocurrency starts using it, I do have to make a statement about it. There are no backdoors in Zero Cash. There are no backdoors in Cardano. There's no intention to put these backdoors in. If they were ever attempted to do so, they'd have to go through some sort of an improvement proposal process. And then that would be on GitHub, and it would be there for months, and people would have to write code. And then people would have to consent by installing the clients and hard forking the system to do that, which is obviously an insane thing. This is what happens in our space. So misinformation tends to percolate and spread, and that's why we have the power of Twitter and the power of these videos to kind of countermand that. So anyway, thank you guys so much for your time, and this is always fun, and I'll see y'all in Colorado. And I hope to have some good news soon about a whole litany of things. And boy, everybody's working real hard, and they're pretty excited about it. Cheers.